Hi guys, today I'm going to show you how to use aggregate devices to use more than one audio interface at the same time using your Mac. What are aggregate devices? Well, simply put, an aggregate device is a way of stitching together two or more audio interfaces inside your operating system in order to use them as one audio interface into your DAW. So some of you, while you've been recording and doing this sort of thing, you might have noticed that most DAWs, I can't think of any that don't, only allow you to have one audio interface for input and output. Some have a slight twist on it, so on Logic you can use different audio interfaces for your input and a different audio interface for your output. But the fact is, if you've only got several two-channel audio interfaces, you can only use one of those at once. Now that's not great if you want to do something like record drums and you've only got a few two-channel ones. What I'm going to show you is how you can stitch those together and use all of those two-channel interfaces at once and get something like an 8-track, way of recording drums, which is obviously what you need for an instrument like that. Another, great use for it is what I'm going to be doing today, and that's going to be recording guitar straight out of my Pod HD Pro, but also at the same time recording some dry DIs in case I want to reamp them later. Other uses, you can use it for more flexibility for headphone mixes. You can get more than one headphone mix. So you can use it for doubling your outputs as well as increasing your inputs, which is really, really useful. It takes about 5 minutes and it's probably one of the most powerful and flexible ways you can get more out of your existing hardware using your computer. Now, I know you can do this in Windows as well, but I don't use Windows, so you'll have to look elsewhere. So if you do use Windows, go and look it up because it's really, really useful. So today, as I've mentioned, I'm going to be using my Pod HD Pro to record a little bit of guitar, and at the same time I want to take some dry DIs so I can reamp later. So what I'm going to be doing is creating an aggregate device from my Pod HD Pro and my Scarlett 2i4 that I've got right here. So what I've done, my signal chain at the moment, is I've got my guitar going straight into the pod, and then I've got another instrument cable plugged into the dry output of the pod because it has a dry, completely bypassed output. And that's coming all the way around the back here and going into channel 2 of my Focusrite 2i4. At the same time, I've got an SM7 here, which is recording my vocals, which is going into channel 1, so I want to be able to record that at the same time. So at the moment, I'm recording three things. I'm recording my voice, I'm recording the dry guitar, and I'm recording the output of the pod with my rhythm patch playing on it. Let's have a look at how I'm going to do this then, how I'm going to create my aggregate device. So you can see here, this is my generic rhythm tone. So it's not particularly complicated patch. I might talk about that later, but not right now. It's all going down the left channel. So input 1 of the pod going into a DAW is going to have my rhythm tone on it. Input 2 is going to be kind of blank and dry. So this is another way you can get really cool DIs and things, but I'm not going to talk about this today. How am I going to go about creating an aggregate device? It's really easy, it takes about 5 minutes, if that. First thing to do is to go into Finder and to go into Applications. From Applications we go into Utilities, and you might see, or you should see, Audio MIDI Setup. So you want to click on this because this is what we're going to use. At the moment you can see all of the in and out devices plugged into my Mac at the moment. So we got the built-in input, built-in output, the HDMI, which has got 2 outs, which is just my TV that I'm using as a monitor. We've got my Scarlett 2i4 plugged into the USB, and my my Line 6 Pod HD Pro again plugged into USB. And then this is one I've made earlier, which is allowing me to record at the moment. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new one so you guys can see how I've done it. So the first thing you want to do is press the little plus sign at the bottom and click Create Aggregate Device. So now we've got a brand new aggregate device down here, and on the right you can see again all of the input and output devices plugged into my computer. The way we create an aggregate device is literally clicking and picking the ones that we want. So obviously we want the Scarlett 2i4, and obviously we want the Pod HD Pro. The order that you click them will have a default impact on which order they come in the sub-devices. So what that means is, at the moment I click the Scarlett 2i4 first. You can swap them around by clicking and dragging them, but I want the Scarlett 2i4 first because it's got my monitors plugged into it. So all that means is when I go into my digital audio workstation, input 1 and input 2 will be input 1 and input 2 of the Scarlett. Inputs 3 and inputs 4 will be inputs 1 and inputs 2 from the Pod HD Pro. So it lists them sequentially as if they were one 4-input audio device. It's the same thing with the outputs. So outputs 1, 2, 3 and 4 will be outputs 1, 2, 3 and 4 from the Scarlett. Outputs 5 and 6 will be outputs 1 and 2 from the Pod HD Pro. Then the other thing we need to worry about is at the top here, clock source and sample rate. So clock source, I'm not going to go into why it does, but it matters because it helps keep these two synced, and it chooses which one leads the kind of syncing process, if you like. So at the moment it's selected to the Scarlett 2i4. It doesn't really matter in this case because they're both pretty good interfaces. If you've got a few audio interfaces you're trying to connect, some of them are a bit cheap and you've got one which is a bit better quality, I'd always recommend using that as the clock source, because that's going to be the best one. That's going to be the best source of, syncing information, if you like. So I'm just going to leave it on the 2i4. And then sample rate, again, I'm going to leave it on the default, which is 44.1 kilohertz, which is just, that's the same as the sample rate that I use in Logic, so it's not going to make a lot of difference. The other important thing here is what you might see, which is drift correction. Sort of in layman's terms, that literally means if one of these starts getting if the pod starts getting a little bit out of sync with the Scarlett, the computer's going to use, special maths to correct it. So you want to have that ticked for the one that isn't the clock source. It just means that halfway through a take, these aren't going to go out of sync and you're not going to get horrible, horrible sound, which is kind of indescribable until you've heard it, but is absolutely and fundamentally unusable. So it basically means you've got a lot less chance of completely ruining a take. So we're going to leave that, and then you can just double click on it to name it. So we're going to call this tutorial device. And there we go. That's literally it. That is all you need to do. I'm just going to load up Logic. I've got it on a different screen here, just to show you what happens. So I'm using Logic. Obviously, not everyone uses Logic, and this will work in any DAW that runs on Mac. So we go into Preferences, Audio, and that lists your input and output devices. So I've just changed my input device to Scarlett/Pod, which is the device that we created a little bit earlier. And that's, working absolutely fine for me. So the way I've set that up is, in here we've got inputs 1, 2 and 3. As I said before, input 1 is input 1 of the Scarlett. So that's the talkback mic. So you can see that's kind of going up and down up here as I talk. Input 2 is the dry guitar, the dry output that we've taken from the pod. So that's plugged into input 2. And then normally, if I was just using the Scarlett, that would be all you can see. But I've got input 3 here, which is input 1 from the pod. So that will be giving me some of my pod distorted guitar tones. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to record a little bit of guitar, just so you can see that we're recording the pod input at the same time as the dry input, and you can hear the difference between those two. So there you go, that's it. It's absolutely fundamentally one of the easiest but most powerful things you can do, again, to get the most out of your existing hardware. No one that's doing bedroom recording should not know how to do this technique, because it is so useful and it's saved my backside on any number of occasions. Again, I'm using this for inputs here, but you can use it for outputs. I'm going to do a little tutorial video on how to set up a headphone mix within Logic, but the principles will apply to any DAW. And I'm going to do a little tutorial on reamping as well, which is another use that you can get out of this. I hope you found this useful. If you've got any questions, please let me know and I will do my absolute best to answer them. But for now, thank you very much for watching and I hope you found this useful.